had the fun opportunity to go to the zoo, and after studying James Gurney's video on Gumroad, sketching animals in the wild, I wanted to try some of the principles that I learned from that and share with you my experience. So we went to the giraffe barn that they had here, and one of the things that James Gurney talks about that I think is a really great idea is to try to sketch animals while they're eating or while they're sleeping, because they're likely to hold still. And so at this time, they actually, just by happenstance, were feeding the giraffes. And so I was able to kind of look at this giraffe, kind of hold that pose while I was trying to sketch it here in gouache. And another thing that I think is really valuable is if you can actually look at a group of animals. Eventually they let out all of these different giraffes. And so if the animal that you're sketching moves or changes, a lot of times you can look at another animal, in this case another giraffe, and I could kind of just get similar pose and other reference information from it. So I'm painting in a Stillman & Byrne Alpha sketchbook, and I've pre-toned the page with burnt sienna, which I really like that, and I felt like it kind of gave things sort of a very natural look to it. And one of the things you want to consider with an animal like this that has a pattern is to think first about the overall pattern of form, the shadow and the light, and to think about painting gradients in kind of a boxy, blocky way, and then you can reassert the pattern over the top of that. So if you kind of look, I'm kind of going back and forth between the patterns and the things that I see here, and I'm mostly just doing the drawing with the brush, but that's something that I tried to think on pretty early on. Here I'm putting in the background because even though I'm sketching the animals, you want to think about putting whatever you're sketching into having a background and putting it into a scenario. And so I tried to create sort of the background tone and leave it sort of transparent so that there's some air in there, and then also the ground plane so that the giraffe doesn't just look cut out, but that you can actually see it in three-dimensional space. So once you've kind of created your forms and you're looking at your shadow and light, then you can go back in and reassert the patterns of the spots and things like that that you see on an animal, or any animal that has a complicated pattern. You want to think about the form first of the strong pattern of shadow and light, and to try to assert that, and then you can come back over with your gradient of whatever pattern that animal has. So this would really apply to any animal, not just giraffes. And so here I'm kind of coming back in and trying to assert the lights and the darks. And I guess that is kind of a question, like, is a giraffe light colored with dark spots, or is it dark colored with lighter lines? I'm not exactly sure. But I really enjoyed doing this, and I guess I haven't spent a long time really contemplating giraffes, but I was really struck by how similar to horses they were, except for essentially the really long legs and the really long neck. And so it was just really interesting and fun to just spend about 20 minutes or so sketching them like this. I also think it's really helpful to have a really limited palette and to be suggestive with some things like the eyes there. Here I'm putting in the tongue. I didn't realize that they had kind of bluish tongues, which was sort of fun. So in the same vein of putting in the background, I thought since they were eating that it would make sense to put in the sort of stalks of straw and branches that they were eating as well, just to make the scene make more sense. So you can kind of fidget around with that and look at different references from the different animals that you have, but this is the sketch that I had, really thinking about that form. And then after this, we went to the aquarium where they had the penguins, and same deal, there's so many penguins here, and so I wanted to grab one of these penguins that was standing like that right at the edge, mixing up kind of a gray and drawing with the brush, and trying to get just the basic form of his posture. And then kind of going in more with some cool whites, and this wasn't like total white. I darkened it down with a little bit of gray, and I really enjoyed doing this really quite small because I couldn't get like overly consumed with the proportions or things like that. But sometimes I feel like if I just trust my gut and I just go for it in a very basic way, I'm much more likely to get the proportions right. So as I was looking at it, obviously they're lit from directly above, and so trying to, put in some highlights, put in some shadows, things like that. Look at not just, okay, their bellies are white and their top of them is black, but actually looking for gradations of what is the darkest dark, what is the next lightest light, and where are the middle tones, and actually dividing things up if you can into multiple values and not just thinking about, oh, this animal's black and white, so I'm just going to paint it in black and white. I kind of wish that I would have stopped here, but they did have these rock formations behind them, and so I kind of went to put those rocks in the background. One benefit of painting the background, though, is it allowed me to clean up some of my shapes by kind of cutting out around the wings and the body and the torso like that. So that was really helpful. You have a voice that matters. Go be creative. I'll see you next time.